All right. Are we ready to get going?
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to week 3 of Inspired Stories. We're really glad you're here. All month, we are exploring how we move forward in unprecedented times. I'm Katie Webster, Green Apron Alliance Program's co-chair and Starbucks partner from 1997 to 2008. While I was at Starbucks, I was so lucky to work on a variety of marketing teams, from channel development to retail North America, and my last position at Starbucks was in the creative studio. After leaving Starbucks, I went to the agency side, and I now work at a strategic digital marketing agency and still flying the Starbucks colors. So today's topic is navigating the current job market. Everything is changing right now, as we all know, and we're all exploring how to position ourselves to adapt. And we're so happy to welcome Angee Linsey, founder of Linsey Careers. Angee helps people hire, get hired, and manage their career with intention. She's a renowned speaker and author of the book, Dare to Be Deliberate, Level Up Your Communications Career. Angee, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Today's discussion will be moderated by none other than Marty Fisher. And Marty, I'll hand it off to you to get us started.
Well, thanks, Katie. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of the Green Apron Alliance's May We Move Forward webinar series. As Katie said, my name is Marty Fisher. I was the Director of Retail Learning and the Director of Culture and Partner Engagement for Starbucks between 1997 and 2005. And I worked directly with Katie during that time. That was a lot of fun. There were some of the best times in my career, and I'm so happy that we're all back together again. This series has been curated specifically for former Starbucks partners and Green Apron Alliance members, using our shared values and experiences to continue to achieve our greatest good. Our goal is to reconnect and learn and have some fun along the way. All right, well, then let's get started. Today's discussion picks up where we left off last week with Linda Glass, talking about what's your pivot. Those of you who joined us for that webcast will remember that Linda helped us focus our attention internally, first clarifying and writing down our values, being realistic about our strengths using the instruments like StrengthsFinder, and then giving some thought to aspirationally, how do we want to feel by making a job or career change? With that critical information as our compass, we're set up perfectly for today's discussion with our panelist, Angee. Oh, by the way, have you heard of Angee's List? Well, that's not this Angee. We got a better Angee. And Angee's going to be talking about navigating the post-COVID-19 job market. I'm sure you're already doing some of the things Angee's going to talk about, but I think you're going to be surprised about what's most important now for a successful job search. If you have a question at any time during our webinar, feel free to type it in the chat box you'll find at the bottom center of your screen. You'll notice that you can send a private chat message to a specific person, or you can send one to everyone. If you have a question, please send it to everyone, and we'll do our best to get it answered today. If there are questions we don't get a chance to answer, we'll post it on the GAA website in the next few days. You know, as companies have moved to remote work to fight the pandemic, and an increasing number of workers being laid off or furloughed, you might be wondering if you should continue to send out resumes or just assume that no one's hiring for the foreseeable future. It's true, economists are predicting a recession, but career experts say it's best to keep networking and applying, provided you change your approach to compensate for these uncertain times. And that's what it's all about. Most employers are questioning how to continue business as usual, and that's going to be next week's topic, Executive Insights, Tough Decisions, during which we'll talk to 4 former Starbucks partners and current senior execs, Andrew Alfano, Christine Day, Genevieve Long, and Shelley Taylor. Now that's a lineup. They'll be next Thursday at the same time and channel between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time. But for today's discussion though, people who are seeking employment are left with an equally tough decision. How do I get a job during this pandemic? While things are changing every day, it's important to know that there are still plenty of businesses actively hiring new employees. Your job search may look a little different than it did in the past, but there still are plenty of opportunities ripe for the taking if you make a few adjustments to your overall job strategy. And that's where our expert panelist, Angee Linsey, comes in. Angee, welcome. I'm so happy you joined us today. How are you doing?
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. I'm so glad that you're here today. So let's start off, let's go back a little bit. Tell us about your time at Starbucks. When were you there and what'd you do? What was it like?
So I was at Starbucks in 2007 and 8. And for those of you, I see a few familiar faces on this call. So for those of you who were there during that time, you know, it was a pretty interesting and challenging transition time for the company. And I was in a recruiting operations role. And I know, Marty, you said you wanted me to tell the story. Do you want me to tell that story?
Please do.
Okay, well, so, you know, it was really an interesting time for the company, but it was a really interesting growth time for myself because while in my career, I'd always held roles that were both recruiting, like I was a recruiter and a recruiting manager. I also did a lot of the operational pieces. And in this role, I was in the operational side. So I was completely a back of the house person. And I'm really a front of the house sort of girl. And so I was in a position that really didn't play to my strengths. And interestingly, because Linda was here last time to talk about that career pivot and playing to your strengths, it was the great Linda Glass that gave me the Strengths Finder and said, you know, the whole team has done this, you should do this. And we're looking at the results of Strength Finder, and my number 1 strength was woo, and my number 2 strength was communication, and my number 3 strength was maximizer. And I was in a job that was about process, policy, and spreadsheets and project management. And so I think that pretty much sums up the story, that it wasn't the best fit. And so I was only there for 15 months.
And so when you finally made the decision to leave, how difficult was that decision and what did you decide to do?
Well, you know, it was really interesting, and this is a whole topic that I know we don't have time for, but I actually got some really great advice from a career coach I had gone to see to talk to him about his business model. Not to get coaching, but to really just say, hey, I have a background in career coaching. I have a master's in career development. You know, what does that look like if I were to hang my shingle? And instead, he gave me this tremendous insight, and he encouraged me to create my career vision. And I did that, and all of a sudden things just started happening. And in October of 2008, I quit my perfectly good job with an amazing brand and started my own executive search and coaching firm.
But then timing is everything, right? What happened right after that?
Well, my last day at Starbucks was October 16th, 2008. And we all know what happened, like, I think at the end of that month. The financial world as we knew it came to a grinding halt, and everybody said I was insane. There's no way that my business would ever succeed. And here I am still standing 12 and a half years later. So it all worked out.
So tell us a little bit about your business. What is the business and what are you focused on?
Sure. So I do executive recruiting for marketing and communications professionals. It's a nationwide business. I have some part-time help that helps me with sourcing when things get busier, but I'm a boutique firm. I do most of that work. When I say marketing and communications, I definitely lean heavier on the comm side of the equation, because in my past life, I was a communications professional as well. And then I also do career coaching, and that's more universal. It's not just for marketing and communications people. And that's just helping people, whether they're in career transition or they want to level up their career, they want to get that stretch assignment or that promotion, or maybe they're just not having good career conversations with their boss and they want to get better at that. Just all of those types of things.
So even though you focus on communication and marketing in your recruiting practice, the basics of how to get a job are really the same regardless of what position you're looking for.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, unless you're, I mean, I don't know if that's true if you're a doctor, but I can say in the corporate world, all of the practices that I talk about for job search, for interviewing, all of those things, they are definitely universal.
Cool. Well, that puts us in a perfect place to begin. So from a recruiter's perspective, how has the pandemic changed the job market?
Well, I mean, I think we're all feeling it, right? I mean, a lot of people have been furloughed or laid off. Companies are really slowing down their hiring. I'm not going to say they're not hiring, because those organizations that have positions that are critical, they have to fill those positions. And I can give some good examples later if you'd like, but they definitely are still hiring. It's just not, maybe not at the same volume. They might be holding off till Q3. And then if they are in the middle of an interview process, what I'm noticing is those interviews are taking longer. They're spread out a little farther. The decision making is just taking a little bit longer.
So what, do you have some examples of people, who's hiring? What are they doing?
Well, I mean, that totally depends. Again, like it depends on the industry. It depends on the types of roles. But if you'll notice that a lot of technology companies are still hiring, you'll notice a lot of grocery companies are still hiring. I mean, all of those things are pretty well known. But I would say as far as like specific functions, it also depends, because if you have a critical function and someone has left the organization, you need to backfill them. It could be an accountant, right? It doesn't matter if it's a critical job.
Are there regional differences in what's happening? Is this, the country is very different in the way the pandemic has taken effect. Are there differences in who's hiring, who's not, based on where you are in the country?
I mean, like, I can't really say that I'm an expert on every region in the nation, but I can say this is a global pandemic, and the pain is being felt worldwide. And so I don't think that there's any sector or geographic location that's like surging with hiring. It's not happening. This is a worldwide problem.
You may think that this is going to be a little bit of a crazy question, but are there any advantages to conducting a job search in this environment?
Of course. Yes, of course. I mean, I'm going to just launch right into my thoughts on this. I know we have some questions that we talked about, but I believe this is true whether there's a pandemic or not. When the title of my book is Dare to be Deliberate for a reason, and that's because I really believe that we are the only ones that can be responsible for our career management. We all want to think that our boss is going to take care of us if we're doing a great job, and that may or may not be true. So I am a huge believer that we all need to do just one or two things every week that's really about being intentional in how we think about our careers. And so it could be something as simple as jumping on LinkedIn every morning and scrolling through your notifications and just reaching out to a couple of people and just say hello in a private message, not just like liking what they wrote on a post, but maybe seeing someone that you worked with in a long time. I can tell you a couple people on this call that I recognize. I'm hoping that we like reconnect and like, hey, it was great to see your face. I haven't talked to you in so long. How are things going? So you want to take advantage of those authentic, real connections and just keep those relationships strong. Because what I hear from everybody that has just gotten laid off or furloughed is they call me up and I say, well, how's your networking? And they'll say, oh gosh, yeah, I'm going to have to start reaching out to people, but I haven't talked to them in 4 or 5 years or longer. And what you don't want to be is that person who only reaches out because you need a job or because you need help. You want to have those strong relationships. You want to have conversations with people in your network just because. And if you're there when you don't need them, they will show up when you do.
But if you haven't spoken to someone in 4 or 5 years and all of a sudden there's a pandemic and you're reaching out, do they see through that as I'm reaching out because I need something rather than I really want to talk to you?
Well, I guess it depends on your motivation. Are you reaching out because you need something, or are you reaching out because you really want to talk to them? And I think that's the question you have to answer for yourself, right? Like, I'm not going to just reach out to somebody because I need something from them. I honestly, like, the one great thing about this pandemic is people actually, the question of how are you doing now has meaning. It's not the, oh, how are you? I'm fine, great, thanks, right? That's what it's always been, how are you? Fine. But it doesn't have to be. Right now, you can reach out to somebody and say, how are you? And like mean it and want to listen to the answer. And I'm going to tell you, whatever the person answers, show up where they are, because everybody's in a different place. I mean, even like me, I'll have a great day and I'll have a day where I pretty much don't want to talk to anybody.
I think we're all in that same place. And it's been kind of funny to your point, and this has been the best part about the reconnection with the Green Apron Alliance, but I've been talking to people that I haven't spoken to in a long time. And I actually just called them up, to your point, with no other intention other than saying, hey, I miss you.
Yeah.
And we picked up, like, we haven't skipped a beat. Like, I talked to them yesterday, and we just have gone on since then. We texted each other back and forth, and it's just been fun. And it wasn't, and I'd love to reach out and say, hey, do you know of any jobs? but that wasn't my intent. And it's just been fun, and I need that.
Well, and I think that there's a way to even do it even if you are looking for work right now. I mean, I think that you can't hide it. Something has caused you to want to reach out, right? So, so I read this great book. It's called Helpful by Heather Hollick, and I actually interviewed her on my podcast, which is also called Dare to Be Deliberate. And the thing I love about her book, it's all about networking. And the thing that I love about her book is she recommends this question for every conversation, and that is, what are you working on? And what I love about that question is it could be anything. It could be, we've gutted our house and we're trying to fix it. Like we're trying to remodel and we're not motivated, right? Like, so you're going to tell me this story because that's what's on your mind. Or it could be, I just got furloughed and I don't know if my job's coming back. And so I'm really thinking about what's next. So that what are you working on question is such a beautiful question to ask anybody when you're networking. Because first of all, it might take the person off guard a little and you'll just get to hear what's really on their mind. But then when they turn the conversation around to you, even if they don't actually say, and you, what are you working on? You can just say, well, let me tell you what I'm working on. I'm working on getting a new job. And here's what I'm doing to do that. And brainstorm with that person, like brainstorm people and places. Because if you make the conversation, hey, I'm looking for a job. If you know of one, let me know. If they don't know of a job, the conversation has just ended. So don't make it so transactional. Make it more like a conversation, curiosity, learn from each other, see how you can help each other, share ideas.
I love it. So how are companies finding and hiring new employees in this environment? Have there been changes in the approach to the actual search?
Well, I mean, I think that I think it's kind of the same, but again, a little bit slower. LinkedIn has taken over the world, of course. So lots and lots and lots of companies have really robust internal recruiting teams. They're doing a lot of posting of jobs. So that's always going to be there. But I'm going to tell you that not everybody, we all know the black hole once you just apply online. I say if you see a job that's posted that you think is the right match for you, look and see who in your network works in that company or used to work in that company or knows people who works in that company, and have a conversation to see if you can make a connection. So that's the first thing. Again, this is not just pandemic time. This is all the time. But I do know that networking and really using your connections, more than half of jobs are filled that way because of someone you know. And it's usually someone in your close-in network. And it's not because of who you know is recommending you, it's not like a old boys club kind of who you know. It's really, especially in this time, people don't have time or the bandwidth to search through hundreds and hundreds of resumes that are not a fit for the job, which I can tell you, if I post a job, which I typically don't post, I just go find people. But if I post a job and I get 100 resumes, there might be 5 that are actually qualified for the job. People just submit their resumes if it has like one keyword, which is really unfortunate. So you don't want to be part of that pile of resumes. That's why you want to rise to the top, because you're actually qualified for the role. And so I would say that by using your network, you might get in front. You might hear about a job that wasn't even posted. And I'll give you an example of that. I have a friend who is a consultant, and she was just reaching out to one of her former colleagues. It was just one of their, every couple times a year they touch base, catch up. So they were going to do a catch-up call. And she gets on the phone with this person. She lives in Chicago, and this person's in New York, and she's a vice president in the same function. And she says, oh my gosh, I know you don't really want to move to New York, but I have a job that's perfect for you. Would you even consider it? I know you're consulting, I know you're happy, but would you consider it? 6 days later, and multiple Zoom calls of interviews, because we're in a pandemic time, so all of the interviews were on Zoom, she had a job offer.
Wow.
And so she started a job. She started like a week and a half ago. So she has never met her team live except for the one person, because that was someone she knew. She's never been to the offices where she now works. And she's going to relocate there probably in January, because they don't anticipate being able to move her before then. So
6
she'll work
days.
remotely until then.
That's amazing. 6 days. Changed
Yeah.
my life.
But it's because it was someone she knew, right? And so I have another example of a person who, it wasn't through networking, it was actually through a LinkedIn job posting, interviewed all via Zoom. And it was like a month-long interview process. Lives in California, the job's in Connecticut. She accepted the role. She's never met anybody live. It's all been via Zoom. And I just talked with her yesterday and she said, oh my gosh, these are the nicest people I've ever worked with in my entire life. I can only imagine how great it'll be when I get there.
That's awesome. I want to come back to the question about the video interviews and Zoom interviews and how they're different. We have a question from Sean Greenley. He says, where are the best places other than LinkedIn to look for a job? I get that networking provides great leads, but are there other avenues as well?
I mean, sure, when you look at job boards, I mean, if you just put into Google the job titles you're looking for, it's going to bring up all kinds of crazy ads, but also Indeed, because Indeed like is a aggregator of different websites, right? So it's a way to find job postings. There's also a lot of specialty boards, like if you're interested in nonprofit or interested in, if you have a specific function, there's always boards for that. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure, like kind of check the date, like how long ago. If I look at Indeed and I look at a job opening, a job posting, I will go to that company's website to see if it's still there.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And Pamela in our audience also says that she seconds you on Indeed.com.
Yeah.
She works for Indeed.
Oh, there you go. See, I like Indeed. Indeed is good.
Cool.
It's also Indeed this is a really good tip. This is what when I'm doing career coaching with someone and you're kind of stuck, like you're not really sure. And a lot of us have job titles that, like, what does that mean, right? And being in the marketing and communications world, like somebody says, I'm a content strategist. That can mean like a million different things if you only looked at the job title. And so I recommend that you go to Indeed, type in like content strategist or whatever the kind of the world of work that you're in, and just look at and it doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to be looking in your geographic area, because what you're doing is you're researching, you're looking at the language. What are some of the job titles that kind of align with the work that you do, so that you're thinking about different titles? Because if you're only looking at one title, that might not be the only title that people go by. So look at the language of the titles, look at the language of the job description. Not only is it important for you to see what companies are looking for, but also how you're telling your story. Because when you're at the interview stage, you have to be able to tell your story in a way that aligns with the way they speak. You want to speak their language. That also is true for your resume. If they're calling it content strategist and you're not saying the word content strategist is nowhere on your resume, they're probably not going to call you.
So let's shift gears a little bit and follow that thread for a minute. You talked about making sure that the titles link up, but when you're applying on an applicant tracking system, every word really matters. So do you have to customize each application to the job that you're applying to?
Yeah, and I don't think the titles necessarily have to align. The work that you've done has to align, right? And so as you're describing the work that you've done, and Pamela says the more you can share about yourself, the better the match will be. That's absolutely true. Tell your story in the best way possible that aligns with the work you've done and the role. And so are you going to have to revise your resume for every job? No, but maybe. One of the techniques I think is a good one to use is if you have some keywords at the top in your summary, maybe make them a little bit, make sure the order is relevant to the role that you're putting it in. I have a funny story. When I was still a comms person, I had moved to California, and my old Michigan roommate, I was staying at her house and I was applying for jobs. So I had her look at my resume, and in the little keywords at the top of my summary, I put speechwriter as the first of my keywords of all the different communications, like media relations, internal communications, but I wrote speechwriter. And she's looking at it and she's just like rolling on the floor laughing, because she's like, Angee, why do you have that on there? I said, well, because I did it. I know how to do it. And she's like, yeah, but you hate it. I was your roommate. I heard you complain about it all the time. So I'm like, oh, I guess, she goes, well, so not only should you not have it on your keywords at the top, but definitely you don't want to have it first. because that would imply that's what I want to do most. So make sure that the way you're telling your story not only aligns with who you are professionally, but think about what do you do well and what do you want to do in your next role? And that's the direction your resume should go.
Makes a lot of sense. So last week, Linda talked about focusing on ourselves, looking internally. What do we want to do? What are our strengths? How do we want to feel? So what's the first step after that? Is it the resume?
Maybe. Everybody puts a lot of weight on resumes. And it's funny when I'm doing a coaching package with someone, they always like, hey, would you look at my resume first? Like, I just need to get my resume done. As soon as my resume's done, everything's good. Yeah, but your resume has to be exactly what I just described. You have to think about, how are you positioning yourself? Who are you? What do you do? And how is that relevant to the direction you're going? Your history is the same, yes, but how you tell the story of your past needs to be relevant to the direction you're going. So when someone asks me like, oh, so what do you do? And this is kind of the verbal positioning, but you'd want to do the same thought on your resume. I don't start by saying, well, I began my career as a communications professional. I did PR, and oh yeah, I went to journalism school. Like I don't go down that road, because that's not relevant. Right now, I'm an executive recruiter and career coach. So when I talk about that, I start with where I am today, and then the backstory comes out later. And I think the same thing has to be true in your resume. Who are you today? That's your summary, that profile section. And then the resume is the proof points on how you got there.
So how consistent do you need to be between what you apply for and your posting your LinkedIn profile?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, if you're a professional, if you're like a technologist, like a software engineer, and you're applying for a communications director job, probably you're not going to get a call. So, I mean, I think you have to be close. You have to show, and that's what I mean by looking at the language of the job description. You have to show, how what you've done is relevant, or you're not going to get the call, because again, they're sifting through hundreds of resumes. They're going to pick the ones that check the boxes.
Susan Jane has a really great point on the chat. She says the resume's value is primarily to get the invitation to tell your story, to be invited to the interview. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. I always say your resume should do three things. It should accurately reflect your experience and education. It should answer more questions than it raises, and it should compel someone to give you a call and learn more. You want them to want to learn more. But if they're busy trying to figure it out because you're like leaving things out, or you've said things in a weird way, if it causes them too many questions, they're just going to move on. And of course, you can't lie. Just don't lie.
Before you could check online, lying was pretty easy on a resume. Not so easy today.
It still happens, though.
Oh, absolutely. How important is it to include a cover letter for online applications?
Well, I think it depends. You know, I'm one of those recruiters who I don't really read cover letters, and I have a lot of friends and peers who also don't read cover letters. But I see, yeah, right. But I will say, for the people who ask for a cover letter, you better have a good one, because there's someone in the interview process who cares about cover letters, and so it needs to be a good one.
Great point. In your book, Dare to Be Deliberate, and also I had a question about the cover of your book. Sean wanted to know whether that's Michael Jordan on the cover of your book.
It is not Michael Jordan. It was actually a picture of a woman like leaping over a, crevasse on mountain climbing kind of thing. So we just made it a little less gender specific, and the power of graphic art, and a really good book cover designer. Her name is Carrie Burns. She lives in Seattle. If you ever need great marketing talent, she's there. She's the one.
Cool. Well, glad we got that straightened out. In the book, you talk about a number of things that you have to do to be deliberate about the job search. So what are those things?
Yeah, and the book's not as much about job search as it is about being deliberate in your career and how you manage your career. And I would say that the list is long, but networking tops the list. really, it's our job as professionals to always, always, always nurture your network. I can't emphasize it enough. We all get so busy head down managing our job, we forget to manage our careers. But if you ask, and in my book, I interviewed 10 executive level communications professionals, and every single one of them credit their success to the power of the people that mentored them, that coached them, the people they mentored and coached. And I can tell you that has to go up and down, because I can give you my great Starbucks example. I actually recommended my old boss from my company before Starbucks to Starbucks, and she ended up moving to Starbucks as a leader in the recruiting function.
Wow.
So, you know, the person that recommends you for a job may not be your old boss. It might be your old employee. So don't neglect your network below you. Think about up, down, and across.
What else on being deliberate?
I'm sorry?
What else on being deliberate about your career?
Let me think. I think another thing that's super important is to really be intentional about the kinds of conversations you have with your boss. Because you might think you're ready for a promotion, and they might not think that. And the only way you're going to know is if you have a really honest conversation with them. And instead of just saying, hey, I think I should be promoted, I would say something like, hey, my career goals include a promotion in this direction. I'd love to talk with you about where the gaps are in my experience, and if we can create a plan so that I can start filling in those gaps. That way, you're actually enlisting your boss to be a champion for your career development. They are not necessarily going to know what to do. But help them help you, right? And so it's really important to be clear about the direction you're trying to go. And if that's a really bad direction, if your boss says, wow, you know, that's just not your strength, then learn more about that. Is that their opinion, or is that a fact, and what else can you do?
Nice.
So career conversations. And then just from a job search perspective, I'd say to be intentional is keep track of your wins, keep track of your accomplishments, because if you haven't changed jobs in a long time and then you suddenly need to start telling your story, we often forget a lot of our accomplishments. So I always tell people to keep a smile file, or just keep a little document with, oh, you know, I did this project, and have just little bullet points where you're describing the project. So when it's time to tell your story in an interview or tell your story on a resume, you get refreshed, you're reminded of all those great things that you did.
And you do that whether or not you're looking for a job now. That's just keeping, I love the title Smile File. We all need that.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever somebody sends you a little note like, oh, wow, you rock, you know, whatever that might be. My first boss gave me that advice. And that was back before everything was on the computer. And I literally had a file on my desk that I called my Smile File, and like I'd have that document that the VP had sent me, or the card or whatever, and I threw it in there. And then when you're feeling kind of down about your career, you can pull it out and be reminded that you don't suck.
A lot better than that. It's funny you say that. I was going through my desk the other day, and I found a card from Howard Behar that he wrote to me back in 2003. And it was maybe 3 sentences, but it really struck in my heart. And I looked at it a couple of days ago, and I just broke out into this gigantic smile. And I had even forgotten. He brought up a couple of points about one of the things he said was, now I'll always trust you, because it was something he had some doubt about what was going to be done, and it turned out to be great. And trust from Howard Behar is gold. And I've kept it for now 17 years, that same card.
Well, and I have the little card that, you know, I'm sure you all remember it. I don't want to reach for it, but I'm sure you all remember it. It was like the drawing of the original Starbucks, and, you know, everybody bought those, right? And it was framed, and everybody on the recruiting team like signed it when I left. And I actually have that on my shelf over here because it's a nice, happy reminder of some really great people.
That's awesome. So let's go back to, you talked about video interviews before. How are video interviews different from in-person interviews? Do you have to do things differently to prepare for the video interviews, and things like talking points, what to wear, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, And I'm sure you've all, we've been on Zoom now for 2 months, so we're all seeing a lot of good things and bad things. And I can tell you, I was talking to some college students one-on-one because I was trying to gather some information from them. I saw inside more closets. Just always look behind you. That's the first tip, right? Look behind you. Do you have an open closet? Is there, do you have a window where there's a flag flying in the background and it's distracting? Just look to see if it's distracting. Also check your lighting. We have, like right now, this is just a fun little get together. So your lighting can be anything, but if you're interviewing, you want to have good light. I interviewed someone last week and she showed up with wet hair and a sweatshirt. Like she just washed her hair. And and I was like, huh. And I actually commented on her hair because if you know me, I tend not to mince words. And I said it in a very nice way, but I'm like, well, if I put you in front of my client, I need to make sure that, you do your hair, put on a nice shirt. And she said, oh yeah, I just washed my hair, but I would never do that for a real interview. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm a recruiter and this is a real interview, right? That I am making a decision as to whether or not I'm going to put you in front of my client. That's a real interview. So I think it's important just to think about it that way, that it's a real interview and you're going to have a conversation with the person. So you want to make a good impression. Do you need to wear a suit and tie if you're a guy? Heck no. Like wear a color or something that you feel good in and look good in because they're only seeing your shoulders up. But definitely put your best face forward. And also think about, you don't have the body, like I talk with my hands, right? So that doesn't work. It's really distracting. Luckily it's below camera because I'm moving my hands all over the place all through this conversation. So recognize how much is being seen and what's distracting. And I think hand movements, especially if you're using the background, how Zoom does backgrounds. If anybody's got the background, yeah. So like if you have see how her hand, Susan's hand, like it like half disappears, that's really distracting. So if you're using a background, you have to hold pretty still. Otherwise, just make sure you have a good, see, Sean. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that you want to just have a decent background that's not distracting.
Any other keys to making the Zoom interview work?
Well, there's the thing about, okay, so right now I'm looking in the camera, so you might feel like I'm looking at you. One good thing about that is you feel like I'm looking at you. But if I just did this the entire time, it would start to freak you out. So you want to have a mix of, I try to put the person's picture, I'll move the screen so that their picture is right below my camera so that I'm kind of looking like that. If you have your laptop down in your lap or something, then you're looking down. It's really easy to have weird angles. So yeah, don't get too close. Your cat goes across the screen. Like all those things happen all the time.
Make sure the other people in your house know that you're doing the interview so they don't walk behind you.
Naked.
Yeah, there's been some interesting ones. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hey, we have a really good question. Before the pandemic, I was focused on growing my career to the next level. In this environment, do you recommend just sticking with current responsibilities until the dust settles, or continuing to engage in working toward expanding or moving forward in that preferred role?
Well, I really think it depends on the organization, but this is a beautiful golden time to really step up to the plate. I mean, I can tell you that I believe that for some individuals, depending on what's happening in their organization and depending on their function, this is your chance to shine. Step up, fill in the blanks, show your agility, show how you're resilient, right? I mean, we're all going through a lot, but in the communications world, a lot of the focus is shifting from external communications to internal communications because the employees are the number one priority right now. Just trying to help employees get settled. When we start bringing people back, I just did a podcast with with someone, and he talked about how we're going from crisis to transformation, and this is going to be a multi-year event. So if you are, no matter what function you're in, if you're paying attention to what that transformation looks like in your organization, and you think, how can I be an asset to this team, whatever team you're on, how can I be an asset in the organization as it evolves? This is not going to look the same on the other side of this. Our roles may be different. Our paradigms may be different. So we just have to keep a really open mind and look at how can we fill in and help. And that's going to propel you to the next level in your career. You may not be having the conversation, I want to get a promotion, but what you should be doing is showing why you deserve that promotion, so that as opportunities come up, you can say, what else can I do? What else can I do that will prepare me to be ready for that promotion?
That makes sense. Sean followed up with a question. Do we even worry about accepting a level down to get into with a certain company?
Yeah, I think that this is a time when if you're currently not working, you know, just 3 months ago, I would have said, hold out for your dream job, like create your career vision and make it real. That's been my mantra for several years. Right now, I'm going to say, yeah, you can create your career vision and make it an aspiration, but you might have to get a job, not the job. And so when you're thinking about a job versus the job, there's some things, of course, you want to do. You want to make sure that you're going to be challenged enough. It might be a level down, that's okay. You're probably not going to get hired if you've been a director or a vice president. You're not going to get hired as a specialist or a manager, because there's other specialists and managers out there who that's the right job for. But maybe you take a job that's just a level down, or a lateral move, or maybe it's an industry that doesn't thrill you, but it's, and take it as a learning opportunity. It's not going to be a blemish on your resume if you've stepped back a little bit or moved out of an area where you are propelling. It's okay. Just like in 2001 and 2009, I was a recruiter during both of those time periods. This will be you'll get a hall pass. When somebody says, oh gosh, I see you had 4 months not working, what happened? They're not saying it with judgment. They're going to be like, oh, COVID. It's just it's going to be fine. Oh, you took this job and it looks like you used to be a VP and you took a director role. Why'd you do that? COVID. Okay, move on. And that's all you want, is you want the person that's looking at that's talking to you about the opportunity to understand the story behind the decision. And I just think it's going to be a judgment-free zone. This is going to you're going to get a hall pass for 2020.
So is making a drastic career change, like change in industry or job type, even possible now?
Potentially, if you use your network to get you there. I don't think you'll be able to apply online, but that's been true. That's true before pandemic, right? If you were one thing and you're applying online for something completely different, the person screening the resume doesn't get the story behind it. So they're going to say, well, you're not qualified for this job. I have all these people who are better qualified.
Stacy just asked a really great question. I submitted my resume to a really good lead, but never heard back. I'd like to reach out for their thoughts on my qualifications. What are your thoughts on that and the approach I should take?
So, Stacy, is this somebody you know well? I don't know if I can see you if you're nodding. Can I see you? I don't see you.
Hi, can you hear me?
There
Yes.
you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, no, it's not someone that I knew personally, but I had connected several times on LinkedIn prior to sending it in. So my guess is there's somebody that met their qualifications perfectly, but I'd love to know where I fell short, because it's still a company that I'd love to get into.
So is the person a recruiter at that organization or just someone you know?
It was not someone I know. They
No,
happened.
but someone you're connected to, I mean.
No, it's funny. I saw the job posting and was looking at the LinkedIn profiles for various people. And it was the VP of operations later on sent me a LinkedIn request, which kind of started a dialogue.
Oh, good.
But then I've never heard back.
And how long ago was it?
About a month now.
So the position may have completely gone on hold, right? It's possible. So don't make the assumption. If anybody's ever read if you've never read the 4 agreements, just go online, type in the 4 agreements and look at the 4 agreements. One is don't make assumptions. because there's so many things that could, I mean, like, I can tell you in March, I had 2 job openings and one went away completely and the other's on indefinite hold. I have another person who I was about to start a search and they're like, yeah, we're on hiring freeze until Q3, maybe Q4, right? So all these things could be happening that you don't know. So they may have found somebody or they may not have. So I would say, go to that LinkedIn dialogue where you have, because like the messages you can still see, right, that you've gone back and forth, and just say, hey, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing during this crazy time? You know, I saw this posting last month. I threw my resume, threw my hat in the ring. I wondered if you're still hiring for that, and if you could give me any thoughts about how I can best navigate the hiring process right now. What's happening in your hiring process? So make the assumption that maybe it's not closed, or if it's on hold, how can you just get some info about it? Like, just what's the status of the role? If nothing else, she could send you a note and say, oh yeah, we hired her. Oh, it's frozen, or oh, we canceled that. At least you know something, right? But I would make it a very, how are you? And always, always, always go in from a place of curiosity, not sales pitch.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I got a great question from Sean. It says, is it better to apply first, then try to connect internally, or make the internal connection, then apply for the role?
So I would make the internal connection first, and here's why. If it's a company that does internal referrals and gives bonuses to people for internal referrals, that person would really appreciate doing you a solid and getting your resume in front of the right person, because they might get paid for that internal referral. The other thing is, if they say, well, go ahead and apply online and I'll put in a good word for you, then you know to do that. So this way, if there's something that can happen better, great, but also what I often see is it ends up being a simultaneous effort, right? You talk to the person you know, they're sort of back channeling your resume, and you put the resume into the system. So it might be both, but I would start with the person you know.
So Stella asked, if we don't have connections or leads into the company, what are your thoughts if we looked up recruiters or even the possible hiring manager for the open role and reached out to them directly?
So I think it's going to be hit or miss, because different recruiters act differently, right? And so if you know that a certain recruiter at a company, like large companies, I know like Amazon, and I know Starbucks used to do this, don't know if they still do, but they would have people that handled certain areas, like, oh, you're on the design team, and so you do all the recruiting for store design, or you're on the communications team, you do all the recruiting for the communications roles, right? If you can find out who the recruiter is for that role, absolutely send them a note. Hey, I'm submitting my resume for this role. Would love to connect with you. If I'd like to get on your radar, whether it's for this role or others in the future, would you be open to an introductory conversation? They may say no, but they might say yes. The answer is always no if you don't ask the question.
You never know.
Right. The hiring manager might be a little different, because, they're leaving it to the recruiter, because if every single candidate who thought they were qualified for a job contacted the hiring manager, they're going to get tired of that. And I go back to the fact that 5 resumes out of 100 might actually be qualified. We as human beings look at job postings and say, I could totally do that job. Oh my God, that would be the perfect job for me. And you have nothing on your resume that is a match for the job. I mean, like it's not obvious. Your resume and the job are not an obvious match. So if you were to reach out to the hiring manager, I mean, if you are truly, truly perfect for the job, maybe, but check with people in your network to see if you're wishing you were perfect for the job. Am I saying that in a nice way?
That was very, very polite. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So let's say you are the perfect person for that match. How much leverage do you have in salary negotiations these days?
Salary negotiations, this is a tough one. In my experience, I have been challenged on this, but in my experience, I have never worked with an organization who sought to lowball people. I've never worked for an organization that said, let me see how cheap I can be to get this perfect candidate to join my team. It's just never happened. Now, will the market shift a little? Are budgets tighter right now? Yes, they are. So are you going to be able to negotiate that extra $25,000 sign-on bonus or whatever? Probably not. And whenever the market is turned, right, like when there's a larger pool of available candidates, they have more choices within a certain salary range. So I would say, if you feel like you're not getting the salary offer that's the value that you bring, you can negotiate. And if it doesn't work out, then you have to be willing to walk away. I don't think I would play hardball, but I also don't think it means you have to just accept the offer at hand. Again, going back to my age-old advice, the answer is always no if you don't ask.
Absolutely.
But it's how you ask.
Yes. So it's amazing how quickly this hour is gone. We're just about ready to close. And Alex just asked a question, and I will send it to you. So do recruiters expect you to negotiate, or do you just take what they offer?
So I'm going to tell you that, again, in my experience, men always ask for more and women don't. And so, and often when you ask for more, you get more. So I know, shaking your head, but it's true. So my feeling is, if I know that there is no way you're going to get anything more than the offer that I'm about to make you, I'm a good recruiter. I have already pre-closed you. I've already set the stage for what's possible. And by the time we get to that offer, there are no surprises. And I'm going to say to you, I went to bat for you. I got the very best offer I could get. I'm so excited. Here's the number. Isn't this great? And the person's going to say, yes. Do I have room to negotiate? I'm going to say, no, there's no room to negotiate. We went all the way to the mat. This is it, right? So that they will say yes on the spot, right? That's my goal. If I know there's room, I'll say, here's the offer. Do you have any questions?
Nice.
Right? And I actually had a candidate say to me, I'm like, I knew there was a lot of room, and she was a young woman, and I want to teach her so badly, ask, but I didn't. I have to represent my client, and I can't do that. So I was like, well, is there anything else that you need in order to accept this offer? And she was like, hint. and she's like, okay, what should I be asking for? And I'm like, what would you like? What do you want to ask for? Ask, and I'll tell you if it's possible. And she was able to get $5,000 extra on her salary and a $5,000 sign-on. So ask.
Your point. If you don't ask, you don't get.
That's right.
Yep. Angee, thanks for a fantastic discussion. I can't believe that our hour is already gone. You gave us a lot of. Oh, absolutely. You gave us a lot of really important things to think about. So thanks for that. So before we let you go, let me give you an opportunity to talk about the services you provide and how people can get in touch with you if they need it.
Sure. So first of all, for all of you who remember me from Starbucks, reach out, say hello. I'd love to do a catch-up call. We can do it by Zoom or by phone. Sometimes we get zoomed out, but whatever. I do executive recruiting for marketing and communications professionals. I'm always happy to talk with great candidates. I'm also always happy if you want to tell someone who needs to hire a great marketing or communications professional that I exist. I do super premier service. And then on the coaching side, if you go to my website, linseycareers.com, and there's the little coaching tab, I have some programs for new graduates, and I have programs for professionals, lots of different choices. Take a look, and I do a free, I usually say 20 minutes, but it usually ends up being a half-hour conversation to decide if I'm really the coach for you, and kind of get you started, whether you decide to hire me or not. And the last thing I'll say is I also have a podcast called Dare to Be Deliberate. I do little 5-minute shorts that are career tips, and then I do interviews with people about how to be intentional in your career. It ranges from Wednesdays with a communications leader talking about transformation and what that heavy lift is going to look like, to the guy who took a really deliberate step in his career, taking a job in Mauritius when he was a chief communications officer for a Fortune 50 company prior to that. and it was just a bold move. So I'm all about daring to be deliberate, really being intentional in your career. So I talk to people who've done that.
Well, and it's clear that you did it personally, so writing about it has the credibility that you deserve.
Well, thanks.
Well, thanks, Angee. Again, you were fantastic. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't tell you how happy on a personal note that we're connected.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. So I'll send it back to Katie to wrap things up. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks, Marty. Angee, that was awesome. I think on behalf of everyone, just the great perspective and the generous guidance. This was a really wonderful hour, so thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining. If you haven't already, we encourage you to create a profile on the brand new Green Apron Alliance platform. It's where you can get access to all of the Green Apron Alliance benefits and connect with all of us too. And of course, that's where all of the future events will be posted. So keep an eye out for what's coming up next, and have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon.